In Daniel chapter 1, verses 8 to 21, we read about Daniel and his three buddies who made a decision to follow the Lord. Now, it was possible that that decision would have resulted in them being executed, yet they stood firm for the Lord. The test was about would they eat the king's food and defile themselves or not. Daniel chapter 1 verse 8 says, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine." Otherwise, he made up his mind, but he wasn't arrogant. He requested permission to only eat vegetables and drink water, but his request was for the entire 3-year training period. And the trainer, who really favored Daniel and his three friends, said he wasn't willing to put his life on the line, and so he said no. Then Daniel requested that he and his three friends be given 10-day tests. Vegetables and water for 10 days, and if they didn't look better than all the other young men, then Ashpenaz could decide what to do with them. The end result was Daniel and his three friends were healthier and brighter than the rest, and they were allowed to eat vegetables and drink water for the entire 3 years of their training. Now, please understand what these 4 young people risked. Rejecting the king and his menu could have resulted in severe punishment. And they could have been branded as uncooperative and lose the chance of advancement in the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar was known for his severe punishment of his enemies. When they captured King Zedekiah, he and those captured were brought before Nebuchadnezzar. And he ordered Zedekiah's sons to be put to death in front of Zedekiah, and he was forced to watch. Then they took the nobles of Judah and had them executed in front of Zedekiah. And then they took Zedekiah and put his eyes out, bound him in chains, and led him off to Babylon. So these young men knew what they potentially faced, and they made up their minds not to defile themselves. Now, they had some good excuses for eating the king's food. Number one, the food being offered would have been very attractive and much better than just vegetables and water for 3 years. Second, they were far away from home. Who would have known? It's easy to compromise when nobody's watching you. Who cares? And number 3, they could have reasoned that God had let them down, that they were captives. Why risk our lives over a diet when we're captives in another country? These young men, though, committed themselves to obedience to God, even if God didn't fulfill their expectations. So how did God bless them? Verse 17 says this: "To these 4 young men God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds." So what it says here is at the end of their 3 years, they excelled in knowledge and in literature and in wisdom and even interpreting of dreams. Now, dream interpretation was something new for these guys, but God knew that they were going to need it. Who was it that helped them become skilled in Chaldean education? It was God. God honored them because they honored God. 1 Samuel chapter 2 verse 30 says, "Those who honor me, I will honor. Those who despise me, I will disdain." So at the end of 3 years of training, when they were introduced to the king, these young men were found to be 10 times better than all the astrologers and magicians, and they were the finest among all the other trained young people. Whoa. Here's a side note. There is no sin in becoming well schooled in the philosophies of our culture. God can use you greatly if you do not compromise. Many young men have been called to be pastors and have studied under liberal teachers, but they have failed to see the errors of their teaching, and they walked away from the faith. Stay grounded in the truth, refuse to compromise, and it will result in God's blessing.